Welcome, everybody. I know more people will kind of dive in here as we start, but I'm going to go ahead and get started because it's noon my time, 10 a.m. Kryssie's time. And we are excited because Kryssie Maybay is here today, and she is the owner of Kismet Design. And she's a landscape architect in Seattle, or the Seattle area. And I got to meet Kryssie and Kathy a couple of weeks ago in just north of Seattle. I did a workshop there, and they did all these other cool things with sponsors. And I was actually telling Kathy, what was last time we met? Like, this is the downfall of me meeting other people, because then I talked them into doing things for us. So Kryssie is here. We negotiated. I'm going to help her too. But I'm excited to have her today. She's going to talk about fees and contracts. And before I forget, I do want to mention, and she'll mention this again later, she is teaching a live class on her website. And actually, Marianne, did you get that link that I sent you? Hopefully you got it. She got it. Perfect. She's doing a live session at the end of this month on fees, contracts, and estimating, I think it was. So we'll share the link now, and then we'll mention it again at the end, and hopefully Kryssie will remind me. And just for Kryssie, so she knows, Mary Ann's here. She is awesome. She helps me. She's on our team. And then Gita also helps in Garden Design Collective. She jumps in and helps and answers a lot of questions too. Gita's in Toronto. Mary Ann's in Iowa with me, a whole hour away, 45 minutes away from me. And otherwise, everybody else here is awesome. And I know a lot of people here, they could be homeowners, but most people here are either they've been practicing for a while, or they're transitioning into it. So there's a lot of people here that are like looking for that information, like, how do I do a contract, or how do I do this? And so there's a lot of questions from a lot of us that are just transitioning into landscape design. So we have questions on the question sheet, but Kryssie also already prepared some thoughts that she thought would be helpful for us. So I'll let her decide if you want to go over through some of your points first, Kryssie, and if you want to tell us anything else about yourself before you jump in. I'll try to be quiet now so you can have the floor.
Be sure to, if you're interested, I'd love for you to join me on the class. But even if that class doesn't feel like the right fit for you, there's a spot. So if you go to Kismet Design and hit courses at the top, there's a spot where you can sign up there to get on my newsletter, where I share any new things that are upcoming. And then I also have my podcast, The Process Driven Designer, that I know a couple of you listen to, because I've talked to you before. So thank you for those of you that listen. And yeah, I just share a lot of nerdy running a design business type things. I don't talk a lot about plants or a lot about design specifically. It's mostly running a design business, networking, things like contracts and estimating and grading and all those fun things. So thank you, Lisa, for having me here. This is really fun. It's great to finally meet you in person a couple weeks ago. And actually, Lisa's been on the podcast as well, and she's going to be on another episode. So I'm sure she'll share that once that one goes live. But if you haven't listened to the first one, definitely tune in. And I should have written down what episode it was, but I don't remember.
Oh, we'll figure it out. You go ahead and talk. We'll figure it out behind the scenes.
So to actually, the questions that got posted to the Google Doc were great. A lot of them were things that I was kind of anticipating. So I'll just kind of jump into a couple of those first, and then I've got some of my own documents that I can share. Is it set up so that I can share my screen?
Yes, I
Okay.
think I made you a co-host. See if it works.
Perfect.
I'll double check to make sure though.
So the first one, and actually let me get some of my docs over here to if you see me looking sideways, it's because I have 3 screens, and you guys are on my laptop screen, and then my 2 functional screens are to the side.
And while you're looking, I want to again plug her podcast. For those that don't listen to The Process Driven Designer, it's a great resource, again, for the business end of a landscape design business. There aren't a lot of options for landscape design podcasts, and Kryssie has a really good one. So definitely check that out if you haven't done that yet.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
So the first question that came in is, how do you structure and calculate your design fees? I know that some landscape architects do like a percentage of project cost. If you don't know what the project costs, it's really hard to come up with that percentage, and it's hard to retroactively charge for that. So I find that to be a really kind of awkward, sticky. I like to be very upfront with design costs so that clients can very confidently say yes or no. And I don't want a client to feel like I'm nickeling and diming them. And I don't want them to feel like I just have their pocketbook open and I'm just spending money by, adding more and more hours to things. And I like to make sure that design fees are fair to both me and to the client. And so I do flat fee designs. That does take a little prep work and a little knowledge. This is the super simple checklist. And actually, let me zoom in a little bit more because I don't know how big your guys' screens are, but I print this out for every client. This is internal only. The client doesn't see this, but before I meet with a client, I will have an initial phone conversation to talk them through the process, explain potential fees, talk a little bit about their project, make sure that they're a good fit for me and I'm a good fit for them. And then I have them fill out a questionnaire, ideally before that conversation, but not always, where I ask all kinds of information. So the typical kind of site location, contact information, but also like, what are you looking for? What are your goals? What elements would you like included? What do you have existing that you want to stay? What needs to be renovated? What's your design style, color preferences? How big is your family? Do you have pets? Things like that, to really get as much information as I can about them. And I have a couple open-ended questions that really help me kind of get into what type of client are they as well. Like I have some clients that they don't have enough room in that questionnaire and they'll send me another Word document with a whole list of things. That tells me I need to add more time for my client meetings because they're going to need a lot of information. And I'm going to need more time to sort through all of the information they're giving me to make sure that I'm doing a good job designing. And then I have other clients that barely will answer questions. And then I kind of do a gut check when I meet with them in person of, okay, are they just not engaged with this, or are they not picky, or do I really need to like twist their arm to actually get answers from them? And then that kind of helps me gauge how much time to put into the design fee. So after I've done that, after I've done a little research on their property, brought up Google Map images, county parcel viewer images, all of that. I usually do this like an hour before I leave my office for the site meeting. I'll come down and I'll be like, all right, initial meeting is going to take me 2 hours. I've already put in an hour's worth of research. Based on the site, I'm guessing it's going to take me 2 hours to measure, another 2 hours to complete the base plan into CAD. Maybe it's going to take me 6 hours to develop concepts. And I just kind of run down the list of that, and I do a total tally, times that by my hourly rate. And then I will, say that turns into, 20 hours. If I've got 20 hours there, I will put like a little asterisk next to that and do, 2 hours less, 2 hours more, and 4 hours more. And so that way I don't have to do math in front of a client, because it will probably be wrong. And then that way I've got an idea already in my head of, okay, that baseline, I'm guessing that design fee is going to be about this. And that way, if I'm meeting with the client, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so much more complicated. They're going to need a lot more information. I'm going to need to add more meeting time. Then I've already kind of got those stage points in there so that I can just quickly flip to the back of my notebook and be like, all right, that means the design fee is going to be X amount instead of the amount that I was originally thinking. Or it might be something where it's like, oh yeah, slam dunk, this is easy. This is exactly what I thought. I can go with that original design fee that had the asterisk next to it. And that way, so to jump into how I do my design contracts, at that initial client meeting, I deliver my design contract, and it is on triplicate paper, which I just purchased on Amazon. It's not like the old school one with like the black inky sheet in between. It just looks like 3 different colors of notebook paper, and I can actually, let me stop sharing really quick. And I don't know if it's super visible, but I can show you. So this is kind of, does that show up? So it's just multiple sheets. I print it on my just regular inkjet printer. And
It was a little blurry, but
well, you get the idea.
we get the idea.
I just print it on my regular inkjet printer. And then when I have it paper clipped together so that when I'm on site, I actually fill that out in front of the client and I'm talking through it with them as I'm filling it out. And then they decide at that initial client meeting whether it's a go or not. So that saves me time from going back to my office and overthinking and wavering back and forth. Is it 20 hours? Is it 22 hours? Because at the end of the day, like 2 hours really doesn't make a big difference. If 2 hours makes a big difference, you're not pricing yourself correctly, which is a whole nother topic. But then they're already excited. We've got good face-to-face connection. It's easier to say no to someone on the phone or over email than it is to say no to someone in person. But it's also easier to answer those questions because a lot of times as someone's looking through a contract, they're going to kind of really think, okay, you know, what is the value of this to me? What is actually being delivered? And that way I can answer those questions live instead of them like sitting on it or thinking, maybe they already told me, maybe asking again is too much. It just kind of takes a lot of that wavering time out. And then it also saves me another trip because I will block my calendar out for that consult day so that they can, if they say yes, I'm going to meet with them, review their project, walk their site, deliver a contract. And then if they sign it, I'm staying that same day and taking site measurements. So it's all fresh in my head. And that way, if we've talked about, oh, we need a screening tree here, or this would be a really great spot for the fire pit, I can actually measure that and mark that on my site measurements so that I've got some additional like brainstorming ideas on my measurements while it's still fresh, instead of scheduling a couple weeks later to go back out and then being like, we talked about a screening tree, but was it for that house or was it for that house? And then, you know, my notes are never super clear. So I like to do things while it's fresh in my brain, and I'm not having to rely on my chicken scratch. I write things down all the time that I look back at later. I'm like, I don't know what I was trying to say, especially when I'm walking and writing and listening all at the same time. Like it doesn't always go all the way through. I do. Yeah.
I'm sorry, a quick question for you. So, and you may have mentioned this, and I apologize if I missed it. So you are on with the client, right before you go there, you fill out that first column, the estimate. And that is the price now, right? Is the actual just for you later, just as a review to be like, okay, how close was I?
Yes.
You don't change the price later.
Nope.
Okay.
I give them a set fee, and then this actual column, am I sharing still? I'm not.
No.
So back to this. So this estimate is what I do before I meet with the client. And so I'll just write down, like just down here, like say I put all of my tally marks in, this comes out to 20 hours. I'll have, you know, what I estimate it to be, one that's a couple hours less, one that's a couple hours more. And then up top here is what I put the actual design fee that I presented to the client, which is also on the contract. So it's a little redundant, but, and then this actual is what I use later to go back. So I don't do this on every project, because I do a lot of designs. I usually pick like one a month, and I'll go back through and be like, okay, how much time did I spend on all of these, and just do a double check. And that way I'm continually analyzing how accurate I am at estimating my hours.
I have
The
a quick
key
question.
Yeah.
Aaron just asked a really great question since you're talking about this. Do you charge for that initial consult if the client backs out?
I charge for it regardless, and it does not go towards the design fee either.
Okay.
So that way it works twofold. So it makes sure that they are a client that is engaged and interested in talking with me, and it gets rid of the kind of, not to bag on Yelp, but like the Yelpy kind of people that just want to like throw out an inquiry to 10 different people and see who bites.
Right.
It also makes sure that they value my time. And I mean, it's a lot of time, and my consult fee does not cover 100% of the time spent, but it makes it so that if they do choose not to move forward, I don't feel like I'm out, 3 hours of time. I'm, at least have half of it covered. I do vet my clients very seriously over the phone prior to meeting with them. So I would say out of those initial client consults, I probably have 98% of them move forward with design. It's pretty rare that I meet with someone and they don't move forward with design. Typically, if they don't, it's either because one spouse is not there and they don't have the deciding power to say yes, or it's because they added things to the conversation that our initial phone conversation, because I do give estimated fees on phone conversations just so they know what to expect. So I might say, okay, for a project your size, your design fee is going to be somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000. If I get there and then they're like, oh, we forgot to tell you, we also want a pool and we want this like big gazebo area, it's going to be more than that. And so sometimes that happens and they're like, oh, we were really thinking it was going to be 2 to 4. And I'm like, well, you just doubled your scope. So like that 2 to 4 doesn't really cover all the time. So that occasionally happens, but I think it's more often than not, the other spouse is either not committed to the process. I do see that where one spouse is like, yes, we need a designer, we need to do this. The other one's like, no, I'm just going to go to Home Depot next weekend. We'll figure it out. That's usually the biggest disconnect if one of them just doesn't value the design. So on that, so we talked about the that design fee is not just based on size, because I've had projects that are 5-6 acres, but they're really simple. So I don't need to measure all 5-6 acres. I can do an aerial overlay to get some of the bounds and then do like big swaths of lawn and things like that. It's really more about the complexity and how much time it's going to take to generate all of the documents. And then there was another one about, okay, so the template to tally approximate hours is this this template, which, can you see that? Okay. I don't have, usually I have a green box around what I'm sharing, but it's not, I don't see the green box.
We can see your spreadsheet. Is that what you're showing?
Okay, yes. So to move on to contract, how many of you have a contract template? So half-ish, or at least that are answering. I think that's fantastic. How many of you do that template after your site visit and then email it to the client later? And it takes a lot of time, right? Like you go through, write a bunch of notes, make sure that your hours are covered and all of that. And at least for me, like when I do it that way, I overthink it. Like, well, what about this? What about that? I'm much better to just be like, decide once, get it done, do it. You win some, you lose some. Like I've had many designs that I underbid. I've had a couple that I've overbid. I did have one project years ago that I grossly overbid. And I actually gave the money back because I didn't feel right about it. But typically I'm within a range of hours that I feel okay with. And some of the projects that you are really efficient at make up for the ones that you're not as efficient at. So my contract, what that looks like is, this is on the triplicate paper. I pre-fill out their client information, and then I just go through the check boxes and say, okay, we're looking at front yard, backyard, side yard, native transitions. These are the elements that are included. And that way, if the scope changes, I have this document that says, we didn't select pool and spa. Now we're adding pool and spa. That changes the design scope. That changes the complexity. That changes the hours. Even more important than that, I have number of meetings. So I will write down how many meetings I have included, because that is the thing that typically adds to the project more often than not. Usually the scope doesn't change, although I have had clients that have changed scope, but sometimes there's clients that just need more meetings. And it's a really bad habit that I would say vast majority of designers do, is not charging for the extra time and the extra meeting time. And it's a service thing. Like, you want to provide good customer service, but they also need to value your time, and you need to stick with your contract. Easier said than done, I know. And then so there's a spot for the design fee. There's also a spot here if I'm anticipating needing extra support. So like if we need to engage a geotechnical engineer or somebody like that, or an architect, I will put that in there. And then I will typically write either an allowance or cost TBD, because I will usually not know what that will be at that point, but I know that it's needed. And then I can get a bid once we kind of have a better idea from one of those service providers to add to that scope. But that way I'm being super upfront initially, saying this is everything that's included. And the only thing that I have not included in this initial scope is permitting. Nobody knows how long that's going to take ever. 3D modeling, additional construction detailing, and then my construction consultation services I have as a separate contract. I don't include that in the design. Not everybody needs it. So I have like a transition point where it's like, okay, you're done with design. Next step is to move on to this other service. And that way they can decide if it's right for them or not. And then the back sheet. So this is printed double-sided. I have all of the legal mumbo jumbo. One of the questions that was asked about that is who I had review that. So what I did is I took a template that I found. I think it was like LegalZoom or something. I don't know. I took a template of a design contract. Now you could probably just type it into ChatGPT and get something pretty robust. But I took the pieces that I knew I wanted included, and then I had my lawyer review it. And the lawyer that I use helped me set up my LLC. He helped me do my estate planning for my family. He's helped me with a little bit of everything. He doesn't specialize in contracts specifically, but he does a lot of business owners. So I was referred to him by actually one of my contractors that I work with. He actually initially used him for his divorce and then ended up using him for other things. And he does all of his business stuff. And that's really what he focuses on, is estate planning for business owners. And so he really wanted to go through this with me and make sure that I had all of the things in line. There's a couple things specifically for landscape architects that's different than a landscape designer. So that's an important distinction to make for any of you that are landscape architects, is there's some opportunities for you to get into a heavier realm of liability by having that license. So it's important to make sure that you're covered for those things. The weird one here that I'll share with you, just because it came up back before I was a business owner, is I had a client that did not own the property they were getting a design for. They were trying to design their neighbor's property because they didn't like their landscaping. And it ended up with a huge legal battle. It was super messy. The contractor that I was working with did not do the due diligence to check. I mean, not that you would. They actually had equipment show up on site for construction. And the homeowner was like, what are you doing here? So a weird one, but I have that in there because of PTSD, probably not super necessary. The other thing that I do include in here is permission to use documents and photos, just like a market release. I'm really conscious of not showing address numbers or any like identifying information or like license plates, things like that in photos that I use. Or I'll like blank it out or put text over it or something. But I do want to make sure, because I have had some high profile clients that don't want any of that shown. They don't want photos of their property. They don't want their designs shared, even if it doesn't have their name associated with it. So I do have that in there. And then if it is someone that has those stipulations, typically it's, sports people, celebrities, things like that, which are, I work with few and far between, but when they do come up, I'll make note and pointedly ask them, like, are you okay with this? I won't share your information. Most of them say no, but it's a good thing to ask if you do work with higher profile clients. And then my contract for construction consultation is very different. It sets up the design fees, what is included and what is not, but then my legal jargon is the same. So that way it's repetitive. I have this set up so that it's good for either. The only thing that's changed is my billing structure is different for those. So for the project management, I think the biggest piece from a liability standpoint in talking about contracts is unless you choose to, don't want to set yourself up to be the general contractor. It opens you up to a huge amount of liability. And it's easier to open yourself up to that if you have a landscape architect's license, which is one of the things I kind of alluded to before. And so for construction oversight, if you call it project management on your contract, that's like a huge red flag. Because then you're calling yourself a manager, and that term is used in construction management to basically say, I am telling the contractor when to be there, what to do, what products to use, what equipment to use. And that's not your role as a designer. Your role as a designer in that is aesthetic oversight and client communication and handholding. Like you're there to kind of be an advocate for your client rather than like an overseer of the contractor. It's really, it's a delicate balance of, I do a lot of things that could be technically considered more of a project manager role, but they are not listed on this contract because I don't want to say that is my role. It's something that I do a lot, but it's not part of the service that the client's signing up for. Does anyone have questions on that? I feel like I've just rambled on really fast.
Oh, that's great information. And you can see this. I've been adding people's questions from the chat onto the spreadsheet, Kryssie, so you can see them.
Perfect.
Then you don't have to go into the chat. But if I miss anything, Marianne, let me know. Get them all in there. And
I'll just go through a couple of these.
Hopefully I try to outline them if they're done, but I may have missed something. So you might want to look at it too to make sure.
In addition to the final plan, what items do you include with your design fee? Plant list, plant care, maintenance instructions, preferred landscape contractors list. Because we're talking about the project management / construction oversight, every designer offers a little bit. I mean, the design services are going to be closer together for what people offer from designer to designer. The construction piece varies greatly. Some designers do just a small retainer and have included like 4 site visits during the entire construction. I have control issues and I can't do that. I am on site 2 to 3 days a week. I'm there all the time. I'm flagging pallets of flagstone because I want it to be certain sizes and, the right color. And I'm very picky about things. I'll go to the rock yard and annoy the guys to no end, picking out like, I want that riser, but not that one. And I want these three, but I need another one that's about that size. Like I get really into the weeds on it. And that's part of the service that I offer, not only to my clients, but it's part of why the contractors I work with like working with me, because it takes that off of their plate. And then they're not having to send me pictures. Is this okay? Is this not okay? I'm like, where do you want to select your materials? I'll go there. I'll pick it out for you. And most of the stone yards know me and they're like, all right, whose project is this? And I'll tell them who the contractor is, and it's no big deal. But it does take time. And so that's why my fee structure is a little bit different than someone that's only going to do 4 site visits. I do know some contractors, and I've offered this a couple times, where I'll do just hourly site visits as needed. The only time I offer that is if the client is working with a contractor of their own choosing. I don't do my full service construction oversight for a contractor that's not mine, because that relationship is huge. I rely on them and their understanding of how I work just as much as they vice versa. And so not every contractor wants a designer looking over their shoulder. And I've worked with some that will specifically say, oh, we're going to do that on Wednesday, when they know they're going to do it on Tuesday and they don't want me involved. And so I just tell my clients, I'm like, if you have a contractor, that is fantastic, great for you. If you need help with layout, or you get into a situation where you want me there, let me know and we'll do an hourly site visit. But I'm not going to do the full service, because it's going to take too much time and they're not going to want me there. They don't, unless they're a contractor that does work with designers regularly and we just don't have that relationship yet. But I charge a little differently for it then, because it's kind of like dating, but you can't dump them as easily when a client's already signed a contract. You can't be like, all right, 2 days in, I'm done. You got to kind of stick through the project. So
When
it's
you,
difficult.
I was going to say, since you're on the site so often, do you have rules of thumb of how close your projects should be before you take them?
Yes. And when I first started my own business, so the company I worked for before, we had kind of honed our bubble a little bit tighter. When I first started my business, I was taking anything. I mean, within reason. But since then, I've drastically honed my bubble in. I do have a project right now, and I typically don't work in Seattle at all, because it's just too far and I don't like sitting in traffic. Um, I have a client right now that I'm working on phase 2 in construction, and every time I drive there, I'm just like, I get a lot of podcast listening in, but it's a long commute and I don't like it. So I do, because I'm there often enough. And that project in particular, for phase 1, I actually had a colleague of mine that lives and works in that area. I subcontracted her to help with site visits. So she would go 2 days a week and I would go 1 day a week. She would send me photos, send me updates of what's in construction, and let me know if there was anything I needed to follow up with the contractor on. And that helped a lot, because I like to stick within about a half an hour of home. Any further than that, and I have a hard time being there as much as I want to. I've been spoiled a couple times and had one that was just like 5 minutes from my son's school. So that was glorious. I was there like twice a day, but it needed it. It was a huge pool project. So that was a godsend that it was that close, because I could be there constantly.
That's awesome. I
Um,
think this next one you already answered. I think that was your first sheet, but I wanted you to make that decision.
um,
The template you
so,
mentioned. Oh, go ahead. You go ahead.
the one thing about figuring out design fees, so if you listen to my latest podcast episode, this will be a repeat, but I do some coaching for designers that are starting out their businesses, and I get a lot of questions and things like that. And I don't know why, but it seems to be a really common practice for designers that are transitioning from being a design employee to being a business owner, to take their hourly rate and double it and be like, all right, that's what I need to make. That is not enough. you're going to be just struggling. You're not going to be able to feel like your head is above water, or that you're a successful business owner if that's what you're charging, unless you were like super highly paid. But I know most designers are going to be somewhere in, the $30 to $40 an hour range as a design employee. Making $60 an hour for everything that you do, cover your taxes, cover your insurance, all of that is just, it's not reasonable. But you kind of, it's hard to know, especially if you don't have a good group, because every area is going to be a little bit different. Like what Kathy and I charge over here in the Seattle area is going to be very different than what you might charge in Iowa. And so that price point is going to be different. I mean, cost of living is different, even cost of insurance, because every jurisdiction, every area is going to have different necessities for insurance. Like for me, I have a general liability, but I also have an errors and omissions. I know there's a couple states that don't require that errors and omissions. It gets bumped into your general liability. So there's a lot of variables there. So I think it's helpful to have a group like this, or APLD is a great resource if you have a local chapter, where you can kind of bounce things off of people. And some people get weird about talking about money. I think it's kind of more of an old school thing. I think younger generations seem to be much more open about being just very upfront and matter of fact about it. But I think a lot of it comes down to knowing how much it's going to take to run your business, which some of it when you first start is going to be a complete shot in the dark guess. But after you kind of get a little bit of, even just a couple months in, you're like, okay, I know, my internet, I know all my subscriptions for all the different software that you need, whether it's QuickBooks, Adobe, if you use a CAD software, like I use Land Effects, even just having a monthly budget for markers, like all those things add up. It seems silly, but it adds up. Even just paper. I've got it blurred because my office is a mess right now. But I've got a large format printer, because I print all of my drawings in my office, which was an initial investment, but it saves a ton of money every month, and time. So those things need to be kind of factored in for what it costs, just baseline to kind of break even. And then you need to decide, okay, this is what I need to live, or this is what my business needs to run. And then on top of that, what you need to live, like your baseline income that you need to make. And then you need to put a buffer on that for this would be my nice to make. And then set yourself a goal for this is where I'd really like to be to make my life more comfortable, be able to take vacations that I want, be able to, buy that new car that, I want to have so that I can tow my landscape trailer, things like that. And so there's a range of kind of baseline where you kind of need to be to just make, $0 net at the end of the year, and then actually come out to be, what everyone has their own definition of success. But I think having a comfortable lifestyle where you don't feel that, that scarcity mindset of needing to take every project that comes at you is really that stepping point where it's like, I am a business owner. I am not doing this as a hobby. I am making a living at this. I am a true professional when you can be like, you know what, that project's not for me. And I'm making enough that I'm not worried about, taking really bad clients that are going to impede on my mental health just so that I can pay my internet bill. I went off on a tangent on that. Sorry.
No, I think that's good. I think that's good advice. And, and off of that a little bit, Kryssie, do you think local resources are valuable in terms of like small business associations and that kind of thing to help with that, or not? Like because I know what you're saying is, how do we figure out, because in the past I've had people visit my classes at Iowa State, business people, and they always talk about, I want to make this much money, right? And how do I work? Then I have to work back to figure out, okay, how many projects does that mean? And then how much do I have to charge? So maybe I'm just sharing this to say, maybe you have to work backwards. Like when Kryssie says, if you want to make 100,000 a year, you're gonna need to figure out how many projects, but you don't even know, the projects are all different too. So you're gonna have to work through that. So I don't know if you have if you have resources that you suggest for figuring out that number.
I really wish I did. I actually was part of a group that was through, I don't remember if it was through the chamber or it was something through my CPA that I no longer work with. That she was like, oh, you really need to be part of this group. And they have basically financial mentors as part of the service for being in this group. And the gentleman that was assigned to be my mentor gave me what felt like very bad advice. I basically told him what I was going to be charging, and I was about a year into my business at that point. And honestly, like, not to like toot my own horn, but I was kicking ass and I was proud of myself. And I just wanted to basically step up my game and be like, all right, what do I need to know that I don't already know? And he basically told me I was making too much money. And I was like, nope, not. And he goes, your profit margins are way too high, and you're charging for things that, shouldn't be charged that much for. And I was like, I'm not going to have 6 different hourly rates for different things. I have an hourly rate. Like, there's more. I think it's a lot of business owners that are not service based think of it more transactional. So like there's a cost of goods and then there's a margin markup. And when you're delivering a service, there's not really a cost of goods. It's more of the value that you're delivering. And that is really hard to put a price on. Like if you were making a painting, like, how much the paint costs, how much the canvas costs, but all of the time is marginal. And then the expertise that backs all of that up, like that's where the value is. It's not the paint cost. It's not the canvas cost. It's the value and the expertise that's being brought to the table. And so that's the tricky point about pricing design fees, is because someone that's really new thinks that they are not as valuable as someone that's got 10, 20 years under their belt. But that might be drastically different. I've met seasoned professionals that are not really delivering anything fantastic, yet they're charging twice as much as someone that is a year into it and just amazingly talented and just pouring themselves into these projects that is delivering of much greater value. And so I think that that's a sticky point where you kind of have to do a gut check and really know yourself, and sometimes kind of step back out of yourself and hear what your clients are saying about you and take that to heart instead of doing the typical, oh yeah, thanks. Like you have to like really hear it and be like, yes, I am delivering a huge service. I am saving my clients money by thinking through these things ahead of time, telling them what decisions are bad decisions and steering them away from that, making sure that they are working with good people for the installation. There's a value in that you can't really put a price tag on.
You're
I
awesome,
didn't really
Kryssie.
answer your question.
That's a great you're a great cheerleader, I have to admit.
Well, thank you.
I think you got everything here, because I think the other part of Becky's question was the template, but I think that was your first spreadsheet
Yes.
that you
Yep.
showed us. Awesome. Oh, this is a question that came up in our community. So do you replace any plants that fail within the first year, or is that the client's responsibility? Or maybe that's with your contractor?
So back to my control issues, I procure my own plant material that I set in place for the contractor to install. So on the bid summary that my client gets, it has everything line itemed out from the contractor, and then it will have an install cost for the plants and then a plant cost. So the plants are provided by me and they're also warranted by me. I do a year warranty because I require my contractors to warranty their things for a year. I hate doing a full year warranty. I would rather do 3 or 6 months, but I feel like I can't hold my contractors to a standard higher than my own. But that way I do also a 6-month check-in and a 12-month check-in after completion of projects, That gives me a chance to follow up with them, see if there's any warranty things that need to be addressed. It also will help me if they've got questions on maintenance, like, is this dying? Should I prune this? What's going on here? Do we need to adjust watering? Things like that. And then I get to take updated pictures, which is great. That was a long question for a simple answer.
No, that's perfect.
There's another question here on how many designs I do a year. It really varies. It varies based on complexity. If I do some builder work also, which are kind of a dime a dozen type of projects. They don't take a lot of time. They don't take a lot of mental energy. But if I include those, I do anywhere from 30 to 45 designs a year. Of those, I do anywhere between like 10 to, I think 2 years ago was 18 projects through construction for a year, which is a lot. I do have an employee. I would not be able to do that much solo on my own. I would lose my sanity if I did.
Yeah, that is a lot. Becky has a question. I don't know if you want to go ahead and ask Becky.
Yeah.
Hi, Kryssie. Thanks for answering my question about the plants. Just as a follow-up to that, could you just explain a little bit more in detail, like how do you, like when the client is charged for those plants, is that part of your contract? Is that part of the installer's contract? Like how do you get reimbursed for those plants?
So I charge the client directly for the plant material.
Okay.
And so the markup, everything, the client or the contractor only charges for the installation.
Got it.
And
Okay.
so I have my markup on my plants, and then my percentage fee gets put on top of that as well. So my markup that's on the plant material is to cover my warranty, and it is to cover the delivery and procurement. And then my percentage of construction oversight services that gets marked on top of that is part of like the facilitating the plant material and laying the plant material out on site.
Got it. Awesome. Thank you.
I do also only warranty them if they have a professionally installed irrigation system, which, as we all know, is not set and forget. But I can't rely on my clients to adequately water an entire garden of new plants, especially through July and August. No matter how diligent they are, it's just, there's things that are going to die, where although it's not a complete guarantee, that irrigation system is a good kind of safety buffer. And then the markup I do on that, because that doesn't take me much time on site overseeing, helps with the warranty if I need to warranty anything.
That's great to know. I hadn't considered that, irrigation versus not.
Most contractors will only warranty plants with irrigation as well. So it's kind of a standard practice. I tote it to my clients as buying an irrigation system is like buying an insurance policy on your plants.
Yeah.
And then you can take vacation without needing to have the neighbor kid come and,
Right.
be on his phone, like spraying your whole yard all willy-nilly. Like it, we've all seen it.
Exactly. Wow. Awesome. So
and-
Edith's got the next question there.
Yeah. Do you have a minimum charge for your design work? I don't necessarily have like a standard minimum for like residential clients. I do for my commercial projects, because I stamp all of those. And so I just have a minimum for that. But for residential design projects, I think just the time it takes to kind of get there, do, 1 or 2, sometimes 3 site meetings, and then the time it takes to measure, like there kind of is an underlying minimum, just because the hours, just there's only so much you can do for under that amount of hours. I do have a couple clients here and there that just need kind of more of a brainstorming session. I don't really tout that because I don't feel like it's a great use of my time, but I have done that for clients that I just either really feel a connection with, or it's a repeat client or a neighbor where I'll go over and I'll just do some quick sketches, or I'll say, yeah, that tree, really needs to come out. It's too close to the house. This is what you should replace it with. But that's not something I do on a regular basis. But I charge double my consult fee for that service, even though it's the same amount of time, because it's not transitioning into design.
Oh, got it. So that's another money-making question on the next one. Do you charge for that initial meeting? I mean, how much do you charge? What do you charge? I'm sorry, we know that you
Yeah.
charge. What do you charge?
I charge $250 for that initial client meeting.
Okay.
And that way it covers not all of my time, but a good portion of it. So that if they don't move forward, it's not a waste. I mean, not that anything's ever a waste, but.
Right. I was gonna say, when do they pay you for that? Do they pay you right when you're there, or do they pay ahead of time? Just curious.
I use QuickBooks, and so I send them a link when I confirm the meeting 2 weeks in advance, and they can pay online for
Okay.
that. I do, speaking of paying online, I have it set up so that it basically their payment works as like an electronic check. If they want to pay via credit card, I pass along that fee because it adds up.
Okay.
I mean, on a consult, it's not that much. Even on a design, it's not crazy, but when you get into project management fees, it's huge. So I don't want to set the precedence early that I'm going to eat that cost when I don't want to later on.
Right. That's great to know that. And there's one more on there.
So this is a tricky one, and this is really about the relationship. I absolutely will question my contractors all the time. I review their bids before the client sees it. So part of my service is I'm kind of a facilitator of that. I put together a workbook with line items for what needs to be bid, what things are optional. I mark down there for the contractor the square footage or cubic yardage of all the materials. And then when they put their bid to it, I review it. And if there's something that looks either really high or really low, I will question them on it and get feedback from them before I send it to the client for review. And then I'm the one that reviews the bid with the client. And so they don't really have a whole lot of connection with the contractor until the pre-construction meeting. They're basically just working with me and trusting me that I've vetted and I trust this contractor.
So that last question, just in case you guys missed it, was, do you ever weigh in on a contractor's bid for your clients? That's a great question. And then we just got another one snuck in there. Oh no, did we get any more snuck in there?
Yes.
Oh,
How
yeah,
long
there we
is your
go.
first meeting consultation? I gauge for the actual meeting portion of that, depending on the size and complexity of site, to be between an hour and an hour and a half. I usually block out 3 hours for that meeting so that I can stay and take measurements.
Okay, perfect. And Gita, did you have another question that you wanted to verbally say?
Oh, you're muted.
Oh,
Hi, Kryssie. Yeah, Kryssie, so who pays the contractor? Is the client paying the contractor, or are you paying the contractor?
That is another really great question. So that goes into liability. So if the client pays me and I pay the contractor, I am automatically legally deemed as the general. I don't want that liability. So the contract is held directly between the client and the contractor, and then I have my contract separately. So for the installation, the client has a contract for me and a contract for the contractor. And I am just a facilitator of that. No money flows through me. The client pays me directly and the client pays the contractor directly. The contractor will typically send me their invoices, send me their contracts, send me all of that, and then I forward it on after I've reviewed. But I don't actually collect and pass along any money.
Are you saying, well, here's the contractor I suggest you use because that's who you want to work with?
Yes.
Yes.
And so part of my services that I offer is basically my black book. I have the contractors that I work with. And if you want me to facilitate and be your advocate through the installation process, I'm going to select the contractor I feel like is best suited for your project. And that is based on multiple factors. It's location, it's expertise, it's location and scope, and its personality. All those factors kind of come in.
So basically, we do the same thing. However, I do work as the contractor and I carry a tremendous amount of liability insurance, but I make sure that they do as well.
Yes.
So Yeah, that's really interesting. Oh, maybe I should switch.
Well,
I'm getting old. I want
the-
to change.
The hard thing is, if you've got a really great relationship with the contractor, it's not really a factor. But if something goes wrong, or if that contractor doesn't follow through with what they were supposed to do, it's on
Yes.
you. And that's honestly a liability that I I don't want to carry unless I'm actually the contractor, and I don't have any desire to be a contractor. I'd rather
Right.
let them do what they do best, and I'll do what I do best.
Makes sense.
Right.
But you're quite involved in the planting of everything. I swear we did the exact same thing. It's just that I don't employ my contractor. However, we do, I don't know, 99% of all our work together. And yeah, I often think about these things. It's very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Kryssie, do you have advice for finding a contractor? There's a lot of new people
Oof.
that are just trying to figure that out here. Like, do you
Um,
have suggestions on trying to find that perfect contractor?
It's really hard. I have two primary contractors that I work with, and I've been working with both of them for over 10 years. I have a laundry list of probably at least 10 other contractors that I've worked with for one or multiple projects, and for various reasons no longer work with. It's really hard. I mean, I know it sounds silly, but it is like dating. You have to have someone that values your piece of that relationship. And my contractors go to bat for me all the time, and it's a huge resource. But I think the biggest thing is talking with other designers in your area and seeing who's doing their work, how they feel working with them, those relationships, and being part of a community like APLD is a great one where I know every chapter has a little bit different dynamic of how many contractors are actually part of those groups. But regardless, like, you'll get some really good resources that way. And even I've had a couple projects where I've had a new like carpenter or something work on a project, and he's like, oh, I also work with this landscape contractor, you guys would really work well together. So I'm always open to that, but I interview new contractors kind of like I would interview an employee, and then I have them take me out to their projects. And I think one of the biggest telling things is if one of their clients is willing to let them showcase their work and bring a designer through their project. Especially something that's over a year old. Like, if they've got that relationship with their clients, it's telling that they've followed through, they have good communication, which is huge. And having a client that's like, oh, absolutely, bring whoever you want to my site. Like, that's kind of a good sign.
It's awesome.
I always give them small projects to start, though. No big complicated ones, just to feel it out.
That's awesome. Gita, oh, you're done, Gita. I want to make sure. One more question, then I think we'll have to end for the days. We have 2 minutes left. Becky snuck in another question. What is your range of percent rate for install? Did I say that correct? What's your percentage?
I charge 15%. There is, among the designers that I am either friends with or coach, that ranges anywhere from 10 to 20%. A lot of it depends on what services you're offering. I do know a couple designers that have different ranges for location, so that it helps cover their travel time. I find that that's harder for me because I just want to streamline everything and have one contract instead of having, this is my contract for projects in this bubble, this is my contract for projects in this bubble. That's just too complicated for me. I'd rather just keep it across the board, and I'm just not as profitable on projects further away, so I take less and less of them as I have the ability to do so.
Perfect. Gita, did you have any more questions?
Yeah, I have one more question. Kryssie, do you ever take on just design only projects? So you're not working to manage it, you're not buying the plants, it's just design. They call you, they say, hey, Kryssie, we love your work. Can you design our front yard? You do?
Yes, I do quite a bit, actually. And I think that that's a good selling point that differentiates me from like a design build contractor, because I have a lot of, I don't know, if it's consistent everywhere, but there's a lot of design build contractors that you only get a design if you're tied in with construction. And I have a lot of clients that either are construction managers in their own right, but do, big, large scale commercial projects. So they don't necessarily need someone to help manage the project, but they need the design because they don't have that aesthetic capability. I have other clients that are do-it-yourselfers and just need a design. So it's across the board.
So when you do that, do you have a hard time letting go of your, I want to make sure it looks like
Yes.
the way I wanted it to be when I sat down to do this. I have a real issue with that. How do you deal with that?
I a lot of wine. I do have a hard time with that. More so like if it's a client that I know is a do-it-yourselfer, I just have that expectation up front that it's not going to look like it would if my contractor were installing it. The hard one for me is if they're seeking out contractors on their own. I have a client right now. They're lovely people. They didn't want to work with me through the installation just purely based on cost. To them, it was an extra cost and they already had a really tight budget, and it's probably better for them not to have that cost, but they've gotten 6 bids now from 6 different contractors with a $50,000 range of costs for a very simple project. And it's hard for me not to want to just swoop in and rescue them and say, I'll just do it for free because I want to so badly. And I know it will turn out better if I'm involved and if my contractors are involved. But I don't know. It's tough. It's really tough, especially a couple of the contractors that they've gotten bids from are contractors that I have worked with and choose not to work with because they don't uphold my standards and they have some shady business practices and they cut corners, and I'm very detail oriented, and I don't want that for them, but it's a decision that, they have to unfortunately make.
Interesting.
I delicately said, this is someone I used to work with. I don't work with them anymore, but this other contractor, I've heard great things about, trying to just delicately guide them away from that person and hope they read the subtitles without saying anything bad about anybody.
That's great.
I love
Kryssie, this is so amazing. Thank you so much. We're already 2 minutes over, so I don't want to take up more of your time, but we did cram a lot in an hour, I have to admit. And before we dive out, I want to make sure that I mention Kryssie's classes she's teaching on February 29th at the same time, actually. And it's called Contracts, Billing, and Estimating. And her and I were talking a lot about estimating too. That's a whole nother fun topic. So if you want to learn more and deep dive more into this topic we talked about today, plus including estimating and billing, definitely join her. And I just included the link in there. Maybe it's already scrolled up a little bit, but make sure you visit. And I don't know if Marianne wants to throw it, and she is. She's throwing it in there again so you don't miss it. But Kryssie, honestly, thank you so much. This is so helpful. It is so helpful for us to talk to practicing landscape designers, and everybody does it differently. Some people do it the same, as Gita was mentioning. Like, it's really cool to see how everybody approaches landscape design and the business end of things. So thank you for being here. We really appreciate that.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been fun. And on the class, we'll review a lot of the same stuff. But then, like Lisa said, we'll dive in a little bit deeper and it'll be an hour and a half. So we'll have a little bit more time to kind of talk about some of the nitty gritty things on just telling and keeping track of hours and all of that. So.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you for everybody for being here. This was a big group. So we appreciate you being here, and let us keep knowing what you need, because we brought Kryssie in because several of you have again asked for more options, like more examples of contracts and estimating. So this was awesome. And thank you again, Kryssie, for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.